Hello. Welcome to our first Come Follow Me edition of Come Follow Me with Mandy Green. I haven't figured out what to name it. So if you have a great name for it, this would be great. I'm also doubling down this week because as I was preparing everything for Come Follow Me, I thought I want to share this on the podcast because this week's Come Follow Me is Easter week. And I thought I have to just share this on the podcast. So I'm recording it for the class for anyone who wants to sign up for the $10 a month class. It's just like a monthly video. Well, it's a weekly video, but you pay by the month. And you just are going to come follow me with me. We'll just walk through the readings for the week, and I'll try and lend what I can to your understanding. For Reflecting Light, it is Good Friday, my friends. I waited till today to record because I wanted to feel Good Friday. I wanted it in my bones. I wanted the remnants of the Last Supper and everything that has to do with in my bones too. So we're just going to double down today, and the podcast might be a little bit rough because I will not be able to edit it out off of the video, but I will just take the audio format from the recording and we'll just put it on the podcast so you can listen to it in either case. So this Easter, it's killing me. It is killing me. But this Easter, I wanted to look at Easter through the lens of Matthew. Now, I always look at it through the lens of John because for me, that's the most insightful lens. And of course, it gives us all of that great information about Mary Magdalene, who is and will for always be my person. So thank you, Cassandra Barney, for this beautiful depiction you did of her that I finally was able to get my hands on. So we will be looking at Easter through the lens of Matthew, and the readings start in Matthew 21. So I started going through all of the text in Matthew, and then it kind of adds some in Mark. But then I thought it's really going to be important to look at this through the lens of Matthew. And I didn't want to edit it out. I didn't want to take these bits and pieces and then take these bits and pieces in a way to kind of look at the story, because I feel at this point, you as a learner are familiar with the story. And what we're looking for is these little threads we can pull. We're looking at little textual clues that would give us a greater understanding of these events of the last week of Christ's life. So I'm actually, and I know it's ambitious, which is why we're just going to go. This made me a really long lesson or podcast, but hey, sometimes too much a good thing is a good thing, actually. So we are going to do Matthew 21 all the way through to the end of the book of Matthew. All right. If you're doing Come Follow Me with me, if you don't have, I love this particular New Testament. You can use any New Testament you'd like, but look at all the space for notes here. Like this actually can fit a lot of my notes, and I have to use lots of colors for, Greek words are a certain color, and Divine Feminine, of course, is going to be this hot pink color. So I'm wearing it. Questions that I have, all of that is in a different color. And so grab a book. I want you in the text. I want you reading with me. I want you to just look at the language, because the New Testament is translated quite well. It doesn't have kind of the huge errors that I would say exist in the Old Testament, or to the same degree, but certainly looking at the words through a little bit different lens than what you're used to. Looking at a verse, while it's not King James English. Sorry, my daughter just came home. We had a little chat. So we're just going to do Matthew 21 through 28. We're just going all in. all in, all the things. All right. Palm Sunday. We celebrated it last Sunday. When they drew nigh unto Jerusalem and were come to Bethphage unto the Mount of Olives, then Jesus sent two disciples. Now, listen to this part in verse 2 that I never noticed before now. Saying unto them, go into the village over against you, and straightway you shall find an ass tied and a colt with her. Loose them and bring them unto me. So right there, you've got a donkey, but a donkey with a child. And not only that, it's a mother and a child, and that both are employed. Now, I never realized this. This is where art really informs our ideas, because what do you see when you see the pictures of Palm Sunday? We see an ass singular, but this one is an ass and a colt, a young colt. And looking in Matthew, both were used. That's something I've never even noticed. And it made me think about, we're looking for threads of how the mother shows up in the story. And I think, isn't that interesting that you have this beautiful, triumphant Palm Sunday? Now, what's so interesting about Palm Sunday also is that the palm fronds were actually used for the Hebrew holiday of Sukkot, which you know as the Feast of Tabernacles. They would create these booths with the palm leaves. And so that's interesting that that symbolism is showing up here at the time of Passover, but it actually has a lot to do with Egypt, because the palm in Greek is called the phoenix, which has a tie to the phoenix bird. And what is the phoenix famous for? It's famous for being reborn, isn't it? And the goddesses have a lot to do with that. Well, they have everything to do with that in ancient Egypt. So there's a thread we'll have to pull on another day. But interesting, isn't it? Verse 3, if any man say aught to you, you shall say, the Lord hath need of them, and straightway he will send them. Again, plural, 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 plural. All this was done that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the prophet, saying, rejoice greatly, daughter of Zion. Again, why this reference to the daughter of Zion? Behold, thy king, the king of the daughter of Zion, cometh to you just. This word is the word for just. It's not meek, it's just. And another way to translate is having salvation. Yeshua means salvation. So thy king cometh unto you just, sitting upon an ass, and a colt, the foal of an ass. And that's a different word there than any of the ass words used before that, because it references a beast of burden. It's a totally different Greek word. So a lot of different symbols here in this idea of a donkey, a child, a mother and a child, and then a beast of burden, someone who will carry the burden going into Jerusalem. Meek in Greek, if you want to go with the King James, praus means someone full of power, but the power is contained by the Lord's will, by heaven's will. So it isn't power that you just exercise as you would like. It's power that is exercised under the dictation or command of heaven. All right. So he brought the ass and the colt and put upon them their cloaks, their himation, which is the outer cloak. Also a great symbol of, in Hebrew, the atonement, right? The kafar, the covering. And also when the woman with the issue of blood grabs onto the Lord, she grabs onto that outer cloak, that himation, and set him thereon. Now, what's really interesting is there's only one book to date. I'm totally going down a rabbit hole here, but you guys love this. There's one book to date that says that Jesus came into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday with his two sons. It's called the Toldot Yeshua, the generations of Yeshua. And that's the only one. Now, it's not a really reliable text, which is why I don't reference it a ton. However, notice that where there's the greatest concentration of light, there will also be the greatest concentration of darkness. And so it's interesting to me that there's two donkeys here. And why would you need two donkeys? And when I first started looking at this idea of a Holy Grail, I was on a tour with John Hall and Chris Kimball, and we were in King's College Chapel for Evensong. And I was looking up at this beautiful panel of stained glass, and there was this beautiful depiction of Palm Sunday, but in the glass were two young boys. And I kind of rubbed my eyes. I was thinking, am I crazy? And there it was. So perhaps there's a reason Matthew's telling us there's two. I don't know. I realize this is not something I can substantiate, but this is different than the other accounts. So we are looking at Easter week through the lens of Matthew today, and we're looking at all of it. All right. And the very great actually can be translated as the biggest or the greatest multitude spread their garments in the way. Others cut down branches from the trees. Now, what's interesting is the Greek word here for trees, dendron, sounds a lot like dendera, which is the temple to the mother god in Egypt, dendera. And I wonder if there's some type of connection between the tree and, of course, the mother and that particular wording. Very, very interesting. And strawed them in the way. And the disciples that went before and that followed cried, saying, Hosanna to the Son of David. Now, Hosanna means save us, please. That's what that word means. Blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest. And when he was coming to Jerusalem, all the city, and this means the entire city, it wasn't just a particular neighborhood or borough or area. It says the entire city was stirred up, literally rocked, agitated, saying, who is this? And the multitude said, this is Jesus, the prophet of Nazareth of Galilee. Now, netzer, the Hebrew word netzer, means the branch of the tree. You seeing all of these things? I hope so. And that Jesus went into the temple of God and cast them all out that sold and bought in the temple, and overthrew the tables of the money changers and the seats of them that sold doves. And he said unto them, it is written, my house shall be called the house of prayer, but you have made it a cave or hideout for robbers and bandits. That's interesting. Now, there's a difference in the Greek wording between a thief and a robber. A robber is someone who steals in the light of day, steals right out in the open, whereas a thief is someone who would steal in the night. And so it's interesting that he's beginning to call it out here and say, you're stealing from these good people right in the light of day, and you're passing it off as good. They're exploiting the vulnerable. They're plundering them. I think that's really, really interesting, and we're going to continue on. For time's sake, I wanted to edit out his condemnation of the chief leaders and the scribes and the Pharisees, but I don't think we should divorce the entire text that we have from Matthew from itself. I think we have to look at the entire thing to appreciate what the Lord is trying to say his last week of his life. Now, I wanted to stop here and say, before we kept going, isn't it interesting that on the first Sunday, the entire city's there, the entire city's agitated and cheering and rejoicing that he's there. And 6 days later, 5 days later, it is difficult to find those who will remain and stand by him in the darkness. That's really, really made me think this week. I've been thinking long and hard about how do I stand by the Lord, and do I stand by him in the darkness when it's unpopular, when it's not the cool thing, when it's not the respected thing, when it's dangerous to myself. Think about that. Think about how easily the crowd is made to cheer and be so excited. And then when it comes down to it, how many are there at the crucifixion? So there we have it. He clears out the temple, and we'll talk a little more about that in the next chapter. And the blind and the lame came to him in the temple, and he healed them. Well, my friends, we're all blind, aren't we? We are all blind, and we are all limping. We are all crippled. We are all not functioning at our total divine capacity here. And he healed them. And isn't it interesting that they came to him in the temple? That was part of that healing. Can I just put that forward to you as the fact that those two are in the same sentence there in verse 14. And when the chief priests and scribes saw the wonderful, and it means like amazing, full of wonder, things that he did, and the children crying in the temple saying, Hosanna to the Son of David, they were incensed. They were indignant. I'm sorry, back to verse 14. I missed my note. It says, and he healed them. Therapeo means to care for, to attend, to heal, to treat, reversing a condition to its restoration. That's probably my favorite definition. Reversing a condition to its restoration, making it as it was before it ever broke down. And if you listen to the Treasures in the Heavens, we talked so much about organization and entropy and how chaos is the breakdown of creation. All right, so they're incensed. They can't believe the kids. They can't believe people are being healed. And he said unto them, hearest thou what these say? And Jesus said unto them, yea, have ye never read? And he knows they've read it. That's why he's saying it. Out of the mouths of babes and sucklings, thou hast perfected praise. That's in Zechariah 9:9. I love that. He quotes their own scriptures that they use to combat him at them. I mean, he's perfect, right? And he left them and went out of the city into Bethany, and he lodged there. Bethany means the house of affliction. Now, for next week's podcast, please stay tuned because I have so much to say about the house of Bethany. We are going to tackle this in amazing fashion, but we can't do that in addition to Easter week. So stay tuned for next week. Now, in the morning, as he returned to the city, he hungered. You could also say he was famished. And when he saw a fig tree in the way, he came to it and found nothing thereon, but leaves only, and said unto it, let no fruit grow on thee henceforth forever. And immediately the fig tree withered away. And when the disciples saw it, they marveled, saying, how soon is the fig tree withered away? Jesus answered and said unto them, verily I say unto you, if you have faith and doubt not, ye shall not only do this which is done to the fig tree, but also if ye shall say unto this mountain, be thou removed, and be thou cast into the sea, it shall be done. And all things whatsoever you shall ask in prayer, believing, you shall receive. Now, I think one of the lessons, and of course, this is not comprehensive at all, but one of the lessons, of course, would be how are we like the fig tree? How do we have this great exterior, this perfect showing of our piety or our spirituality or all the things, but we actually fail to produce fruit? And I think that's why Christ curses the fig tree, because it's a representation of the leadership at the time. You're going to see when he just starts calling them out. The word for the hypocrite actually means someone who is an actor. So someone who's playing a role, but doesn't have the inner conviction. Isn't that fascinating? So here we have this idea of a tree looking beautiful and very tree-like. It's just this perfect treeness, but it actually fails to do the one thing that the tree was made for, which is to produce fruit. And so that's the question I would put to you. Do you really exercise faith and overcome doubt enough to produce fruit? All right, verse 23. Now, when you see this little paragraph sign, it's called a pericope, and it means it's kind of like a news story. And when he was coming to the temple, the chief priests and the elders of the temple came unto him as he was teaching and said, by what authority dost thou these things? And who gave thee this authority? Now, this word exousia means power. It can mean weight. It can mean delegated authority, power to act. It's really what it is. And Jesus answered and said unto them, I will ask you one thing, which if you tell me, I likewise will tell you by what authority I do these things. You know what? If you ever want a great, maybe I could do this for one of my papers coming up, but if you ever want a great thing to think about how the Lord engages with people. It's always this discussion. He could have very easily answered that question, but he answers it with a question, and he's trying to get at the heart of the matter and show them that why should he talk to them if they're unwilling to talk to him? So lots and lots of questions. And I think that's so important to all of us who are seeking. You're never going to be upbraided or reprimanded for asking a question. You're not. You know, one of my favorite Coldplay songs is The Scientist. And it says, tell me your secrets and ask me your questions. And I love that. Let's go back to the start. It's trying to understand what happened at the beginning and what's happening now. And the Lord will always, always invite your questions. And he may answer them with a question, or he may, but engaging with you is part of how he teaches. He doesn't just sit there like I am right now, actually, and just pontificating on a video cast. But, you know, we're limited. We have earthly things. Okay. So here's his question. The baptism of John, whence was it? From heaven or of men? And they reasoned with themselves, saying, if we shall say from heaven, he will say unto us, why did ye not believe him then? But if we shall say of men, we fear the people, for all hold John as a prophet. Isn't it so interesting that everyone can hold John as the prophet, and that's okay, but the Lord is not even giving that type of consideration? And they answered Jesus and said, we cannot tell. So, of course he knew. Of course he knew it would be a difficult question for them to answer. Not because of their true answer, but that they would answer in a way that would benefit them. And there's no way to have it benefit them. And he said unto them, neither tell I you by what authority I do these things. But what think ye? A certain man had 2 sons. And he came to the first and said, Son, go work today in my vineyard. Now, vineyard is oftentimes symbol of the ancient church. And then in John 14, remember, we're going to have this beautiful sermon of the vine, how the vine has to be tied to Christ. The branches don't exist outside of him. So the son answered and said, I will not. But afterward, he repented and went. And he came to the second, said likewise. And he answered and said, I go, sir, and went not. Whether of them twain did the will of his father? Which of these two did the will of his father? They say unto him, the first. Jesus saith unto them, Amen. Well, verily is translated as Amen. It's actually the name of the Father God in Egypt. And anytime you see verily, this is in my 25 Greek words that you should know class. If you want to know more about the words that we're reading, I really, really recommend taking that class. But this word verily, it gets translated as verily, but it's literally Amen. And anytime you see a verily that's actually an Amen, I circle it because he's invoking something in the name of his Father. This is serious stuff. And you'll notice that everything that's going to follow after that Amen is going to be important to notice. All right. So right here, he says, verily, I say unto you that the tax collectors and the harlots or the prostitutes go into the kingdom before you. Well, I personally would love to see this moment. I know we consider always looking at this very, very kind Jesus, and he is the epitome of kind and goodness. But once in a while, he just is going to throw it down, and he's not afraid to throw it down. He's not afraid to call it out. And right here, these are the first fighting words in Matthew. This is where he just throws it down, because those are those are some of the most reprehensible people in this time, the tax collectors and the harlots, right? And remember that Matthew is a tax collector. Jack Welch has some interesting papers on that. He thinks he may be someone who collects the temple tax, or he could be someone who collects the Roman tax in like it's depicted in The Chosen, in which case he is, of course, just ostracized, because why would you ever support the Roman occupation? So not good people. And he just named the two worst people that would go into heaven before these guys. So he's not playing nice anymore. In fact, I think he's actually, he's saying it as it is. He's saying it as it is, but I think he's also knows what needs to happen, knows that these people have such dark hearts that they would actually be provoked to kill him. And everything is according to his design and his plan. And please remember that during all of this. For John came into you in the way of righteousness, and ye believed him not, but the publicans and the harlots believed him. And ye, when ye have seen it, repented not afterward, that ye might believe him. Here another parable. This is in verse 33. There was a certain head of the house, or master of the house, which planted a vineyard and hedged it round about, put barriers around it. Now, for this one, I want to transpose the thought and think of it in a more cosmic sense, that there is this vineyard, this place for growing, and hedging it about is putting veils or barriers around it, and digged a wine press in it and built a tower. Now, of course, we know that Migdala is the word for tower. It's important that every vineyard has a tower. And Mary Magdalene comes from Migdala, which means the great one, the elevated one. But Migdal is the root for tower. If you put that ah ending on it, it's Migdala. If you break down the Hebrew word, it's M, gadol, so with greatness, with the feminine ending. I'm sorry, next week I'll have my whiteboard back. My neighbor had to borrow it. So we have the tower. And what is the reason you would have a tower? Well, the reason you would have a tower is that the tower allows you to see far off. It gives you a vantage point where you can see everything around you. And one of the gifts of the goddesses, if you look at an Asherah pillar, she has these unusually huge eyes because she provides this gift of sight, this gift of vision. So just a nice little thing there about the tower. So he let it out to husbandmen and went into a far, far country. He went away. He went far away. And when the time or the occasion of the fruit drew near, he sent his servants to the husbandmen that they might receive its fruits. Remember in Treasures in the Heavens, we talked about a planting as well, if you've been listening to the podcast. So that's something else to look at. Verse 35, and the husbandman took his servants and beat one and killed another and stoned another. Again, he sent other servants more than the first, and they did unto them likewise. But last of all, he sent unto them his son, saying, they will reverence my son. But when the husbandmen saw the son, they said among themselves, this is the heir. Let us kill him. Let us seize on his inheritance. And they caught him and cast him out of the vineyard and slew him. When the Lord, therefore, the vineyard cometh, what will he do unto those husbandmen? They said unto him, he will miserably destroy those wicked men, and will let out his vineyard unto other husbandmen, which shall render him fruits in their seasons. And isn't that interesting? That they can perfectly see the justice on earthly terms, but not in heavenly terms. And I think that's exactly where we need to be making those leaps in our own mind, is looking at an earthly inheritance of, oh, I can inherit this vineyard, but guess what? You're still going to die, or someone's going to take it from you. And putting all of this work into your earthly vineyard, or helping cultivate heavenly treasures. For verse 42, I want to jump to the Joseph Smith translation here. Well, we'll jump there on 47. It doesn't start until verse 47. Nope, that's not right. Okay, never mind. Did you never read the scriptures? The stone which the builders rejected, and the word here could be disapproved or disqualified. The same has become the head of the corner, or the angle, or the secret place. This is the Lord's doing, and it is wonderful in our eyes. So again, this idea of like, you study scripture all the time. And here I'm going to quote scripture back to you. Therefore I say unto you, the kingdom of God shall be taken from you and given to the nation, bringing forth the fruits thereof. And whosoever shall fall on this stone shall be shattered. But on whomsoever it shall fall, it will grind him to powder. In other words, in the long haul, you won't win this fight. Anything against Jesus is going to fail. And when the chief priests and Pharisees heard his parables, they perceived that he spake of them. So finally, the light bulb comes on. But when they sought to lay hands on him, they feared the multitude because they took him for a prophet. Well, this idea of being shattered on the stone, I can't help but think of this Joseph Smith quote where he says, the saints fly to glass or shatter like glass when they hear any new doctrine that challenges them. And I think that's important for us. Again, we're always trying to liken the scriptures to ourselves. We're always trying to learn from what the scriptures are teaching us. And that's worthy of note. How open are you to the teachings of the Lord? And are you open to perhaps new things that will yet be revealed? There are many great and important things pertaining to the kingdom of heaven that have yet to be revealed. How open are you to receiving those? Are you going to fly apart like glass? Or are you going to be able to withstand the weight? All right, chapter 22. Man, this is going to take forever. I'll try and speed it up. And Jesus answered and spake unto them again by parables and said, the kingdom of heaven is like unto a certain king which made a marriage for his son. This word is gamos. It's actually a wedding feast. It's a feast that celebrates the marriage. You've got to have both components of that. And he sent forth his servants to call them that were bidden to the wedding, and they would not come. So the most obvious guests refused to come to the wedding. Again, he sent forth other servants, saying, tell them which are bidden, behold, I have prepared my best meal. My bull and my fatlings are killed, and all things are ready. Come to the feast. But they made light of it. It literally means that they became careless about it. They neglected it. They disregarded it and went away, one to his farm, meaning back to his own field, his own country, his own place, and one another to his business, to his work. And the remnant took his servants and entreated them spitefully, or abused them and slew them. When the king heard thereof, he was wroth and sent forth his armies and destroyed those murderers and burned up their city. Then he said to his servants, the wedding is ready, but they which were bidden are not worthy or deserving of it. Go ye therefore into the highways, right? The meeting places of all the roads, the place where all the roads connect. And as many as you shall find, invite to the wedding feast. Isn't that interesting that you have this exclusive invitation as a wedding guest, and the wedding guests refuse to come? And so the Lord of the household opens it up, and this Greek word means all. Everybody that you can find, invite to the wedding. We are all invited to this wedding feast. Everybody's invited. So those servants went out into the highways and gathered together all, as many as they found, both good and bad, and the wedding became full or complete at the table. And when the king came in to see the guests, he saw that there was a man which was not clothed in a garment. Now, the Greek word for clothed is enduo, to be clothed, right? Interesting temple allusion there. And he said unto him, friend. Now, this word friend actually is going to show up when Judas is in Gethsemane with the Lord, because he calls him friend. And I was thinking, oh, that's so nice. He still calls him friend. Actually, that's not what it means in the Greek. It means someone who is an imposter. Someone who is a wolf in sheep's clothing. Someone who's putting on the act. It is an imposter. So interesting. How camest thou in hither not having a wedding garment? And he was speechless. Then the king said to the servant, bind him hand and foot, take him away and cast him into outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth, for many are called, but few are chosen. Called means invited, appointed, given the opportunity. Few are chosen, electos, the elect. That's where we get this. Someone who is chosen out by God. And isn't it interesting that this is all having to do with self-selection? You get to decide. Notice that the invitation was to all. You get to decide. Verse 15, then went the Pharisees and took counsel how they might entangle him in his words. We have got to shut this guy up because he is coming at us. Now, they've been worried about all the things he's doing and all the reports are getting back. But at this point, he's coming at them head on. And they sent out to him their disciples with the Herodians. So now here's tactic number 2. We didn't work, so we're going to get our stooges to come out and talk to you. Saying, teacher, not rabbi, actually. Notice that they just say teacher. We know that thou art true. And teach us the way of God in truth. Neither carest thou for any man, for thou regardest not the appearance of men. So we're going to try flattery. We're going to send our stooges. He doesn't know who they are. So they think. And we're gonna get him here. I can just imagine them just thinking all night, like, what are we gonna do? Okay, this is gonna work, right? It's like George Costanza with the biggest burn, about the jerk store. They're all out of you. That's what I picture, right? This very George Costanza revenge plot. So verse 17, tell us therefore, what thinkest thou? Is it lawful to give tribute unto Caesar or not? Well, now they're trying to mess with this Roman occupation and get him in trouble with the Romans. And Christ, of course, perfectly handles this. Jesus perceived their wickedness or their depravity or their plotting, their malice, right? And he said, why are you testing me, ye hypocrites? And this is that word, actor, a stage player, a pretender. He's saying right there, I know you're a pretender. I know you are for fake. You're not here to talk to me at all. And then he says, show me the tribute money. And they brought him a penny. And he said unto them, whose is this image and inscription? They say unto him, Caesar's. Then he saith unto them, render therefore unto Caesar the thing which are Caesar's, and unto God the things which are God's. When they heard these words, they wondered, marveled, and left him, and went their way. Well, then we have the Sadducees come up. And isn't it interesting that Matthew's trying to show us all the way they're trying to trip up the Lord? So in the interest of time, I'm just going to say that they don't believe in the resurrection. And they say, well, this man married a wife and then he died. And then she ended up marrying all 7 of his brothers. Which one has her in the resurrection? To which he responds, verse 29, ye do err, or you wander. You've been led astray. You've gotten off course is what that word means. Not knowing the scriptures nor the power of God. For in the resurrection they neither marry nor are they given in marriage, but are as angels of God in heaven. But as touching the resurrection of the dead, have ye not read that which was spoken unto you by God, saying, I am the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob. God is not the God of the dead, but of the living. Zoe tone. I know you've heard me say the word Zoe, right? To have this expression of the God's way of life. And when the multitude heard this, they were shocked at his doctrine, his teaching. But when the Pharisees heard that he had put the Sadducees to silence, he had literally muzzled them, they convened together. So here's our next attempt. Then one of them, which was a lawyer. So let's get the big guns, right? Like, this guy's better than we thought. Can't do it with Sadducees. Can't do it with our play actors. Can't do it ourselves. Let's get a really good lawyer and ask him a question, testing him, saying, Master, this is verse 36 of Matthew 22, which is the great commandment in the law. Now, this word commandment really, I think, has taken on a new life of its own for us that isn't actually as reflective of the original Greek. And tole is an instruction. It's a military command. It's a charge. It's an injunction. And so the thing about entole would be whatever your commander commands you to do, you would do. The obligation or the charge that he gives you is what you would do. And so that may change. That may be specific to who you are or where you are. Do you see the difference there? So that's going to be really, really important when we talk about John 14. Hugh Nibley translates that, if you love me, keep my commandments. He translates that as, if you love me, stand watch as a sentry awaiting my instructions. Stand watch as a sentry awaiting my instructions. And as we go through the rest of these chapters, you're going to see that standing watch is a theme, an absolute theme in the Gospel of Matthew in this last week. And it's so important that we are standing watch, that we're looking, we're participating, we're watching, awaiting the instructions of the Lord himself for what he would have us do for him. All right. So verse 36, Master, which is the greatest commandment in the law? Jesus said unto him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all the heart of you, with all the soul of you, and with all the mind of you. I just like to say it more how the Greek does, because I think it really is like all of it, right? Now, the heart is the center of your body. It's what keeps life pumping through your veins. If your heart stops beating, you're dead, right? So it's seen as the center, what motivates and propels everything else, right? Your character, your will, your intention. The soul of you, Suchi, is the breath of life, the uniqueness, what the gods breathed into you. So whatever your gifts are, whatever your particular mission or thing that you need to know and learn or do to help others is, that's what's employed in your love of the Lord thy God. And with all of your mind, with all of your insight, reasoning, your thoughts, inherent in this is this scale of balance, that it's going to require you to balance all of this out, to use your brain to figure things out. I'll never forget, we were at a zone conference in our mission, and our mission president kept getting all of these questions, and they just got more and more mundane, actually. And I'll never forget, he just looked up and he said, and I have to say, President Chappell is the most Christ-like leader I've ever known in my life. He was an extraordinary leader. And he just looked up and he said, if all else fails, don't forget to use this. And he points at his head, meaning you have to have a vibrant mental faculty. All right, verse 38, this is the chief or the principal commandment. And the second is like unto it, you should love your neighbor as yourself. This word is agape. This is a godlike love. Love is defined by God, that you regard the welfare of all. Now, it doesn't say you have to like everybody. And I think that's really important too, isn't it? We can love people that maybe we don't like. And also implicit in that is to love yourself. How can you possibly love your neighbor if you don't know how to love yourself? To the degree that the gods love you is one way. The gods love and care for you is one way to translate that as well. To love your neighbor to that degree. Well, I don't know any of us who can do that. We're all working on it. I work hard at that, but it's really hard sometimes, isn't it? And so just in those two commandments, we've got our work for a lifetime. We don't need to be adding so much and putting more on us. I love verse 40. On these two instructions or commands or injunctions hang all the law and the prophets. Everything the law or the prophets point to is this. And then one last question. While the Pharisees were gathered together, Jesus asked them, saying, "What think ye of Christ, the Christos, the anointed one, the Messiah? Whose son is he?" They said unto him, "The son of David." He saith unto them, "How doth David in spirit call him Lord? Saying, The Lord said unto my Lord, Sit thou on my right hand till I make thine enemies thy footstool." If David then called him Lord, how is he his son? And no man was able to respond him a word, neither durst any man from that day forth ask him any more questions. The Greek there means they didn't have the courage or they didn't dare to ask him anything. All right. And then verse 23, he is just going to start to wail on these guys. Then spake Jesus to the multitude and to his disciples, saying, The scribes and the Pharisees have sit in Moses' seat. All therefore, whatever they bid you observe, that observe and do. The law has merit, is what he's saying. But do not ye after their works, for what they say and do not. Okay? Don't trust in the arm of flesh. The law, these injunctions, these commandments are going to help you get closer to heaven, but don't look to them as the example of how to behave. And why? They put in chains heavy burdens. And this word for burdens can mean a task or a service, or it can also be translated as literally the weight of a ship, the freight of a ship. Those are heavy burdens, aren't they? So they're going to put them in chains, and you'll see that this chain is of their own making because they choose not to enter into heaven. They choose not to follow the Lord. They choose to hold fast to what they've been taught and to do it perfectly, and they do it perfectly. But they bind men in the sense that they don't allow others to follow the Lord. Not only do they not go into heaven, but they restrict others from going into heaven. Continuing on with verse 4, so they put in chains heavy burdens, which are oppressive, difficult to carry, almost impossible to carry, and lay them on men's shoulders, but they themselves are unwilling to move them with one of their fingers. So the burden of the work and everything that has to transpire is put on the people, and they themselves are unwilling to lift a finger. I mean, that's pretty damning, isn't it? And then he says, you're going to see them, the works they do to be seen of men. They make broad their phylacteries. These are the things that hold the scriptures, and enlarge the borders of their garments, and love the uppermost rooms at feasts and the chief seats in the synagogues, and greetings in the markets, and to be called of men, Rabbi, Rabbi. But be not ye called Rabbi, for one is your master or your teacher, even Christ. And all ye are brethren. So the only hierarchy that exists is the Savior, and the rest are the brethren. And call no man your father upon the earth, for one is your Father, which is in heaven. Neither be ye called masters, for one is your master, even Christ. But he that is greatest among you shall be your servant. He who is greatest among you in the widest sense shall be your servant or waiter. And whosoever shall exalt or raise up himself shall be abased, humbled, or brought low. And he that shall humble himself, and I think a good way to translate this is recognize his state before God, his or her state before God, shall be exalted, shall be raised up, shall be lifted up, go to higher places, continue on through the heavens, go on to eternal progression. Verse 13, but woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites. Now, this woe is an expression of grief. It's sadness. I think he's just like, you guys are, he's so angry, but he's also just like, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? And this is the big thing that I can see that deserves their condemnation. For ye close up the kingdom of heaven against men. For ye neither go in yourselves, neither permit ye them that are entering to go in. So notice what the Lord is highlighting here. He's going to go through and just start calling them names, which is kind of magnificent. Like I said, this is an aspect of Christ that I'm not sure we're so used to, or so we just picture him as always nice. And you realize that there's times when he just calls it. But notice who receives his ire. It's not the prostitutes. It's not the tax collectors. It's not those who are genuinely trying. It's those who shut up the way for others, those who would compel, those who would be compulsive, those who seek to control others. That's who's going to get his ire. So I'm just going to read through most of these. I mean, I guess if you want to name call someone, a whited sepulcher is going to be about as bad as it gets here. But in that time and place, it was like the worst. It was the worst. So verse 14, woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, actors, right? Imposters. For you devour widows' houses. You squander them. You use them up till they're gone as an excuse. And for an excuse, make long prayer. Therefore ye shall receive greater judgment. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you traverse sea and land to make one convert. And when he is made, you make him twofold more the child of hell than yourselves. Well, there you have it. I mean, I totally want to see this. Hell is Gehenna, which comes from the Hinnom Valley, where children used to be actually sacrificed, right? The most dirty, filthy place. Verse 16, woe unto you, blind guides. Okay, he's going to tell you why he's so mad at them. Because they act as a guide, but they themselves are blind. And the fact that they're blind is not recognized by them, but that they're also going to stop others. Which say, whosoever shall swear by the temple, it is nothing, but whosoever shall swear by the gold of the temple, he is bound. In other words, the oath made about the temple is not as important as the oath made over the gold of the temple. Well, right here, you know where their treasure is. Where your treasure is, your heart will be. Treasure is on the things of this world. Anything you can buy with money, right? Ye blockheads. I would translate that blockheads and blind. For what is greater, the gold or the temple which makes holy the gold? And whosoever shall swear by the altar, it is nothing. But whosoever sweareth by the gift that is upon it, or the sacrifice that is upon it, he is bound by his oath. Ye blockheads and blind. For whether is greater, the gift or the altar that sanctifies the gift? Whosoever therefore shall swear by the altar sweareth by it, and by all things thereon. And whosoever shall swear by the temple sweareth by it, and the ones dwelling in it. If you're going to swear by the temple, It has to be in recognition of everything that's holy, that sanctifies everything that goes in there. And he that shall swear by heaven sweareth by the throne of God and by him that sitteth thereon. Woe unto you. Again, this lament. Scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for ye pay tithe of mint and anise and cumin, and have left out the weightier matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faith. These ye ought to have done. Again, your outward practice is all that's done. There's no inner practice. You blind guides which strain at a gnat and swallow a camel. You're going to strain at a gnat. You're going to take the widow's mite and fail to see that you're robbing the widow. And you're going to point out everyone else's flaws. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for ye make clean the outside of the cup and the platter, but within they are full of excess, spoil, robbery, and self-indulgence. Thou blind Pharisee, cleanse first that which is within the cup and platter, that the outside of them may be clean also. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for ye are like unto whited sepulchres. Okay, this is like a tomb is the dirtiest, ugliest thing, which just has a nice whitewash paint job on it, which indeed appear beautiful outward, but are within are full of dead men's bones and all impurity. Well, if that's not going to make him mad, I don't know what will. He continues on, and it just gets worse. We'll jump down to verse 33. You vipers, like a serpent, right? A serpent, this word, ophis, comes from something used by Satan. So you are the offspring of poisonous snakes. How can ye escape the sentence of hell? Wherefore, behold, I send unto you prophets and wise men and scribes, and some of them you shall kill and crucify, and some of them you shall flog in your synagogues and persecute them from city to city, that upon you may come all the righteous blood shed upon the earth, and from the blood of righteous Abel unto the blood of Zacharias, son of Barachias, whom ye slew between the temple and the altar. Verily I say unto you, all these things shall come upon this generation. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, killing the prophets and stoning them which are sent unto thee. How often would I have assembled your children together? This word is where we get the word synagogue, right? To bring all together. Even as a hen, or it could actually be any type of bird, gathers her birdlings or her chicks under her wings, and you would not. How often that word there in that sentence means multiplied many, many, many times. I'm not sure you could exhaust how often he would gather them. It's interesting that that word is used. Behold, your house is left unto you desolate. For I say unto you, you shall not see me henceforth till ye shall say, blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord. Well, he continues on to talk about the calamities that will come at the second coming. And because this is taking so much time, I'll probably just summarize this. But I want you to understand. Let's look at verse 4. Jesus answered and said unto them, take heed that no man deceive you. Again, there's that word watch. Be watchful, be paying attention, be looking, become aware. For many, and it means many, much, and often. So you're going to have this onslaught of people shall come in my name saying, I am Christ. and shall deceive many, or cause to wander, or cause many to roam. And this is where it's so important that you know the voice of the shepherd, that you know his voice. And when he calls, you recognize the voice. If it's not a voice you recognize, boy, I would say that's probably the most important thing for you to be working on, is to know the voice of the shepherd. In the show notes for the podcast and on the class, I'm going to I'll make a note here to send you some videos of a shepherd calling his sheep. It's actually fascinating. And sometimes the shepherds will even tell the people what words to use and how to say it. And the sheep won't come until the shepherd actually calls. And so you do have all of these imitators, all of these actors, right? All these people who have this really great exterior look or presentation that aren't actually the real thing. And you shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. And this is so important. See that ye be not troubled, disturbed, agitated, anxious. When you see all this happening, when all these wars start breaking out, don't get disturbed. For all these things must come to pass. All of this has to happen. But the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There shall be famines and earthquakes in diverse places. Do you know the Greek doesn't have pestilences? So I didn't say it, but famines. Have you been paying attention to what's happening to our food supply? All of these food processing plants are being lit on fire and blown up and destroyed. So it's go time, my friends. Make sure you have food for yourselves and those you love. All right. Nation rising against nation, earthquakes. All these are the beginnings of, and I would translate that as the birth pains, right? We need a new heaven and a new earth. Then this is the beginning. And then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted. This word phlipsis in verse 9 means to be pressured, to be hemmed in, to be rubbed together, especially internal pressure. Something that causes someone to feel confined from an external outer pressure. Wow. Did we experience something like that? Which is leading to a lot of mental things as a result of that certain pandemic. You can look at that. Many shall be tripped up or ensnared or made to wander. Offended is not a great translation. Anytime you see that, it means tripped up or trapped. And shall betray one another and shall hate one another. Now, this word, missio, is so important. Please underline hate and say love less or esteem less. Our world is cashing in on hate. We've monetized hate. And this is going to be part of what takes us apart, my friends. Anytime you esteem any other child of God as less, for whatever reason, that's not a good thing. Because feeding that hate is not going to do you any good. Verse 11, many false prophets, right? Pseudo. These wolves in sheep's clothing, they're disguised. They're intentionally disguised. They're made to look exactly like the real thing. That's why they put on the sheep's clothing. They want to fit in. They want you to see them, but they're really wolves. They shall wake and deceive many. And because iniquity shall abound, I would actually translate that as lawlessness shall be multiplied, right? Are we seeing this? Are we seeing lawlessness multiplied? The love of many shall wax cold, will become cold. But he that shall persevere or have fortitude to the end, the same shall be saved. And this word saved, sozo, means healed, preserved, rescued, delivered, restored. And then he's going to go on and talk about it's just not going to be pretty. Verse 21, then shall be great tribulation, this pressure, right? This pressure, this internal and external pressure, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. And except those days should be shortened, there should be no flesh saved. But for the elect's sake, those who serve him, those days shall be shortened. Then if any man shall say unto thee, lo, here is Christ, or there, believe it not. For there shall arise false Christs and false prophets, and shall show great signs and wonders. It's going to be tricky because they're going to have all these manifestations that seem to be the real thing, insomuch that if it were possible, they shall deceive the very elect. Wherefore, if they say unto you, and I think this is really important, behold, he is in the desert, go not forth, right? He's in the desert. He's in the waste places. Don't listen. Don't go to the waste places. Don't go somewhere that makes your gut feel weird or your alarm go off. Behold, he is in the secret chambers. Believe it not. It's so interesting when we take tourists to Egypt, and I love it so much, but it's become just the way that the economy is there. Those who work there like to get something called a bakshish, like a little bribe. And if you walk past, there's all these ropes and delineations of places you're not supposed to go technically, but for a few dollars, they'll say, hey, come back here to this secret place, or I'll take you into the Holy of Holies. And I've seen some amazing things that way. I'm not going to lie, but it reminded me of that, of like some imposter saying, hey, come here, I'm going to take you and show you something really cool and really amazing. But even seeing that, it's not the real thing. Seeing the Holy of Holies in Hatshepsut's temple is beautiful and amazing, but the power isn't there, right? You've got to go where the power is, where the real thing is. Verse 27, for as the lightning cometh out of the east and shineth even unto the west, so shall also be the coming of the Son of Man. All right. There's a lot of things that point to the fact that his coming will be in the east. For wheresoever the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered, or the birds of prey. Those who are, and the eagles, right? The birds of prey, these are people who are able to go higher. They're able to fly, they're able to ascend, right? In a spiritual sense. That's why angels are depicted with wings. They have this ability to go higher, to go between worlds. And then he talks about the sun will be darkened, the moon will be dark, the stars will appear to fall from heaven, everyone will mourn, and then the angels will call forth the elect from the four quarters of the earth. And none of this will happen until it's all happened. Verse 33, when ye shall see all these things, know that it is near, even at the gates. Heaven and earth shall pass away. That's the clue there. We're going to get a new heaven and a new earth. But my word shall not pass away. But of that day and hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only. Again, that's why you need to stand watch as a sentry, awaiting his instructions. Verse 42, watch therefore, for ye know not what hour the Lord does come. Stay awake, stay on guard. be wakeful, be watchful. All of these clues to me kind of seem to always say it's in the night. There's something in the night that you need to be paying attention to. Don't fall asleep. Don't be overcome. Well, we're going to see this perfectly mirrored in Matthew's account in Gethsemane. Perfectly mirrored by his followers. Therefore, be also ready, verse 44, for in such an hour as ye think not, the Son of Man cometh. Be on hand. Have your preparation work done. Have everything ready so that you can go forward. Okay. I just had to take like an hour break so I could get my brain back on track. This is going to end up being a very long class, or probably the longest podcast I've done to date. But you know what? It's Easter. Is there any better time to do it? So if you need to cut this up into segments, please do. We're starting back in with Matthew 25. And again, think of why the Lord is saying this the last week of his life. There's a reason I'm going through this particular sequence. It's that everyone hails him. Then he's challenged by the authorities. And then he's going to use these things as opportunities to teach. Then shall the kingdom of heaven be likened unto 10 virgins, Parthenos. It could mean virgin. It could also just mean a young girl. It could mean one who is faithful to the bridegroom as well. Remember that the Parthenon was built to Athena, right? And the Parthenos would be the Vestal virgins would be the ones who served in the temple, but it wasn't their entire life. Often they would, after their temple service, they would go get married and have a family. Not that that matters to any of this. I don't know why I said that. Okay, which took their lamps and went forth to meet the bridegroom. Now, isn't it so interesting that the Lord's, one of his most important titles is that of the bridegroom? So important. And I think we don't even pay attention to that because we don't even think about the bride, or we think of the bride in simply the terms of his church. But there is a bride. I'm here to tell you that there is a bride. Okay? But in regard to us and the bridegroom, it is entering into a covenant relationship and a familial covenant relationship with him. And 5 were wise and 5 were foolish. Moros, like maybe that's where we get the word moronic. It means dull, flat, kind of stupid, dull in understanding. They that were foolish took their lamps and took no oil with them, but the wise took oil in their vessels with their lamps. At midnight, while the bridegroom tarried, they all slumbered and slept. So I wanted to take this opportunity to show you, this is a replica oil lamp from the Holy Land, and it fits perfectly here in the palm of your hand like this. And I remember giving this to my friend, good old Heidi Swap, and I remember her being like, okay, that's not that much oil. I think I can do this. And I'll never forget that, because I think sometimes when we think about the bridegroom and the 10 virgins and this parable, we think that the requirement is, gallons and gallons and gallons of oil. But the fact is that if you have sufficient for your needs, you're going to be okay, right? It's something that you carry with you. It's something you can actually hold. But of course you would hold sacred, but it's not this ginormous, menorah or something like that. So hopefully that's instructive. For those of you on the podcast, it's probably 2 inches by 1.5 inches. It's not really big. It fits right in the palm of my hand. Verse 5, while the bridegroom tarried, they all slumbered and slept. Now, the word for oil, eleon, is oil from the indwelling of the Spirit. It's oil that's pressed out of the olive tree, right? And it really is what's extracted out of our experiences, the spiritual light that we carry, and our experiences. Remember, we're here to have an experience, to learn from our own experience. And so I always used to wonder as a kid and even as an adult, why they won't share their oil. It seems like that's not the nice thing to do. But the fact is that how do you share experiences? How do you share bearing a child or a spouse? How do you share overcoming adversity? How do you share a divorce? How do you share a faith crisis? How do you share abuse? And so the only one you can really share that with is the Lord. But if you're able to take everything, how do you share the joy of a child being born? How do you share the joy of a marriage? All of these things, right? How would you share that? You can talk about it, you can write about it, but the fact is, it's inside of you, right? It's what's distilled from your experience. And that's really, really hard to share. Your testimony, what you know to be true. We all try to share as much as we can to help others develop their own source of light and their own supply of light. But the fact is that heaven's going to help you with learning from all of those experiences. And that makes more sense to me. Maybe I'm off, but that makes more sense to me. All right. At midnight, again, there's this nighttime hour, which I think it keeps showing up. It's going to keep showing up. There was a cry made, behold, the bridegroom cometh, go ye out to meet him. Then all those virgins arose and trimmed their lamps. Now, the word here is cosmeo, which is actually the word to organize, to adorn, right? The gods organize the cosmos. So it's such an interesting word choice there. I don't think that's like a small word. That's a pretty big word there. And the foolish said to the wise, give us of your oil, for our lamps are extinguished. Right? Whatever we had done, we had not maintained enough oil to keep that light alive. But the wise answered, saying, not so, lest there be not enough for us and you. Journey rather to them that sell and buy for yourselves. And while they went aside, right, off, the bridegroom came, and they were ready. They that were ready went in with him to the wedding feast. And the door was shut up. Afterward came also the other virgins, saying, Lord, Lord, open to us. But he answered, saying, Amen, I say unto you, I know you not. And the Joseph Smith translation there is, you know me not. You don't know me. Or you would have been ready. You would have had the oil. Watch, therefore. Again, here's this idea of being alert, on the watch, paying attention. For you know neither the day nor the hour wherein the Son of Man cometh. Now, in verse 9, where it says, lest there be not enough for us and you, I don't think that's a really great translation. The word there is to be possessed of unfailing strength. And if you think about temple ordinances, and if you think about actually coming into the presence of the bridegroom, you need a lot of fortitude, strength, blessing, heaven's blessing, in order to pass through that veil. And that's not something you can share. That's not something you can give to somebody else. If you want to come into the face of deity, you've got to have light. You've got to have testimony. You've got to have truth, conviction, righteousness, all of these things that would enable you to even knock at the door And then, of course, the Lord would have to bestow his power upon you that you could endure his presence. But this is what we're talking about. We're talking about doors being opened and about coming in to greet the bridegroom. It's going to take everything you have. It's going to take everything you have. In Egypt, the goddesses would anoint an initiate with something called the fiery oils so that they would be able to pass through these some of these places, right? One in particular where it's a very treacherous road. And so again, we have this idea of, oils are used for anointings and people who are set apart, people who have been given those types of things. So beautiful things of how you can decide which kind of person you want to be. All right, the next one we have is the parable of the talents. Kingdom of heaven is as a man traveling into a far country who called his servants and delivered unto them what was in his possession. And unto one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, and to another 1, to every man according to his several ability, to his force or his power, to what he's worked himself up to or herself up to. And straightway took his journey, went home. Then he that had received the 5 talents, now remember this word receive, lambano, means to actually lay hold of, take hold of, make it part of you. Okay? To receive is different than to have something given, right? That's the actions on the giver, but to receive is something that you do. It's an active word that you do to lay hold of what was given. And he went and traded the same and made them 5 other talents. Now, this word for traded can mean work, perform, or acquire by labor through his work in industry and through his life experiences and through the things he learned to do. He was able to have more talents than he came with. And likewise, he that had received 2, he also gained another 2. But he that had received 1 went aside behind and digged in the earth and hid or concealed his Lord's money. He took what had been bestowed on him and hid it. And after a long time, the Lord of those servants cometh and reckoneth with them, made an accounting. And so he that had received 5 talents came and brought other 5 talents, saying, Lord, thou deliverest unto me 5 talents. Behold, I have gained or traded up for the better. I love that translation, that I've taken this and made it into something better, right? Good, better, best. I've improved on what you gave me. I've made it more plenteous and bountiful. Behold, I have gained or traded up for the better, besides them 5 talents more. His Lord said unto him, Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy or the gladness of the Lord. And the second one, the same thing happened. And verse 24, then we had our 1 talent man who came and said, I knew you were a hard Lord. I love this description. I knew thee that thou art a hard man, reaping where thou hast not sown, tough or stern. Again, if the Lord wants to make you into something, he's not going to always keep you at a nursery level. If he's being tough on you, it's because he needs you to grow stronger. He needs you to have the ability to bear more weight. He needs you to be able to stay in that game. So if you are being particularly tried or tested, know that he is doing what needs to be done so that you grow to the maximum. And in that sense, he is a tough master. He's not going to let you off easily. because he sees who you really are and what you can really become. Right? And these other two saw that and went with it. Verse 25, I was afraid and went and hid thy talent in the earth. Lo, here have what is yours. And the Lord answered and said unto him, you wicked. And this word can be translated as the agony and affliction that always accompanies evil. There is kind of an agony and affliction that accompanies evil, isn't there? And slothful servant, someone who is hesitating or reluctant, someone who drags one's feet, someone who's unwilling to act. Thou knewest that I reap where I sowed not, and gather where I have not strawed. You should have at least changed it with the moneylenders. Therefore take the talent from him and give it unto him which hath 10. For unto all kinds that hath shall be given, and he shall have an abundance, an excess. Even if you have one talent, do you know how much one talent is? It's 150 pounds of silver. Even if you had one talent, you have an abundance. And if it's a gold talent, that is 6 times that. Okay, so wait, I mixed up my math. A talent, 300 shekels, 3,000 shekels, 6,000 denarii, 75 pounds. And if it's a gold, it's 6 times that. So if it was a 75 pounds, you would have 300 pounds of gold. Okay, that's an excess. I always felt bad for the guy with 2 talents. Well, that's 150 pounds of silver. Certainly that's enough for you to do what you need to do, isn't it? Maybe you feel that way about your talents. Maybe you feel like the gifts that you've been given aren't these 5 talent things. Maybe it's 1 talent. Well, 1 talent is still a ton. And guess what? By working with that 1 talent, you can make 2 talents, which is a lot. And then you can grow up to be a 5 talent person or a 10 cow wife, Mahana, right? All right. And then he talks about separating the sheep from the goats. And then verse 35, for I was hungered and ye gave me meat. Now I wanted to look at these scriptures in a little bit different light than we normally do. Hungered can also mean desired earnestly. I know that I have spiritually been very, very hungered at times. And when someone gives me meat, meat fills you. Meat actually fills you and it stays in your stomach for a bit. You're not going to go hungry. I know a lot of people need milk to start out. But for those of us who truly, truly desire, being fed meat is probably, for me, the greatest thing in the world. And we can help each other with this. I was thirsty and ye gave me drink. Again, spiritual thirst, my friends. I write about this in my essay for the Hymn of the Pearl. We have spiritual thirst and those who fill it with the waters of life. Bless our world. I was a stranger. I was alien. I was new. I was unusual. And you took me in. That's this word. Synagogue, right? Synagogue, like to gather in, to make me part of something, to make me part of the family. Naked and ye clothed me. Well, I think we all can feel naked at times, right? Vulnerable, exposed, revealed, open, and to be clothed, to have someone put a garment, as Joseph Smith said, a garment of love around us. Amazing. Amazing. Also the Savior's atonement, right? To wrap that beautifully around someone who feels naked and exposed and vulnerable. sick and you visited me. Sick can mean weak morally or physically, right? I think we have just as much mental illness as we do of any other kind of physical illness right now. And you visited me. You actually looked up and saw me. You recognized me and you noticed me, not just like, oh, I see you, but like really took the time. I was in prison and you came to me. I was walled in, right? That there's a lot of ways we could look at that in today's world. And you came unto me. And then shall the righteous answer, saying, Lord, when saw we thee hungered or fed thee, or thirsty and gave thee drink? When saw we thee a stranger and took thee in, or naked and clothed thee? When saw we thee sick or in prison and came unto thee? And the king shall answer and say unto them, Verily, there's that Amen, the name of my Father. I say unto you, inasmuch as ye have done it unto one of the smallest of these, my brethren, ye have done it unto me. And then shall he say also to them on the left hand, the goats, Depart from me, you doomed into everlasting fire, prepared for the devil and his angels, because you didn't do any of these things for me. Not one. Now, what's so interesting is that in the crucifixion, the Lord will be imprisoned. He will be hungered. He will thirst. He will be stripped of his clothing. He will be sick. He will be afflicted. And they're all just going to watch on. I'm not sure I ever put those verses in the context of the crucifixion, but they absolutely show up. And he's telling them beforehand what needs to happen for them to change and repent. And there it is in black and white. And they won't do it. All right. Well, those are the parables that Matthew gives us. Take a deep breath. Take a little sip of your beverage. Push pause if you need to. Let's finish our story. Chapter 26. And it came to pass, when Jesus had finished all these sayings, he said unto his disciples, You know that after 2 days is the feast of the Passover, and the Son of Man will be surrendered up to be crucified. Then assembled together the chief priests and the scribes and the elders of the people unto the palace of the high priest, who was called Caiaphas, and consulted that they might take Jesus by trickery and kill him. But they said, Not on the feast day, lest there be an outcry from the people. I love how they're so fastidious, right? We're going to take an innocent man, we're going to kill him because we don't like him, but heaven forbid we do it on a holy day. Now, when Jesus was in Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, there came unto him a woman having an alabaster box of very valuable, very precious ointment, and poured it upon his head as he reclined. Well, what's the one place in the world you can get alabaster, my friends? It's in Egypt. It's in the Luxor Valley. So here in my hand, I have a alabaster cup goblet. This is kind of my gorgeous holy grail that I love, that I bought in Luxor. That's been hand carved. It's that beautiful white. Now, what's really interesting, and I don't know, I've been trying to find this out if any of you can find this out. But the only alabaster that actually can hold a liquid is this green alabaster. So the last time I went to Egypt, I bought this green alabaster jar. I love this jar so much. It fits perfectly in the palm of my hand. Again, it's hand carved. And when you put alabaster to light, maybe my phone will do this. Let's try this. If you put light in alabaster, it refracts it. You see that? See how the light goes through the alabaster? Sorry, on the podcast, you won't be able to see that, but I wanted everyone on the video to see that. So there's your two examples of an alabaster jar. When his disciples saw it, they had indignation, saying, "To what purpose is this waste? For this ointment might have been sold for much and given to the poor." Some sacred things or some beautiful things have purpose. And I think it's important that we remember that it's not necessarily the worst thing to have something significant and beautiful. When Jesus understood it, he said unto them, "Why are you paining or troubling or cutting this woman? For she hath wrought a beautiful, virtuous, and good work upon me. For ye have the poor always with you, but me ye have not always. For in that she hath poured this ointment on my body, she did it for my burial, for my embalmment." This woman understood that the Lord had to die, and she was preparing him for that process. Just like those goddesses in ancient Egypt, right? And interestingly enough, where do we get alabaster from? Verily, there's our Amen word. In the name of Amen, I say unto you, wheresoever this gospel shall be proclaimed in the cosmos, there shall also be spoken that this woman had done, be told in memorial or as a record of her. Then one of the 12, called Judas Iscariot, went unto the chief priests. Now, I've talked a lot about Mary Magdalene and the anointing in John, so I'm not going to belabor that point. If you need a reference for that podcast, I will put it in the show notes. Then one of the 12, called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said unto them, "What will you give me? And I will deliver him unto you." And they covenanted with him for 30 pieces of silver. Isn't it interesting that they made a covenant over money to betray the Son of God? And from that time, he sought opportunity to betray, or surrender is probably the better translation there. Now, the first day of the feast of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus, saying unto him, "Where wilt thou that we prepare for thee to eat the Passover?" So Passover is going to be at Friday at sundown until Saturday at sundown. And he said, "Go into the city to such a man and say unto him, the master saith, my season is at hand. I will keep the Passover at thy house with my disciples." And the disciples did as Jesus had appointed them, and they made ready the Passover. Now, this is another podcast for another time, but I have my Passover plate here. And it's made to, in the Jewish religion, it's made to reference the time when Moses brought the children of Israel out of Egypt. But if you look at what's on this plate, there are a lot of things that actually have to do with what I believe is the ultimate Passover, the ultimate sacrifice of the firstborn, because you have the egg. Remember, the egg is life and new life, and a bone. You've got the wine, you've got the bitter herbs, all of these things that are going to be parts of this story that we're reading. Verse 20, now when the eve was come, he sat down with the 12. There's a lot of evidence here that there were people there in addition to the 12. I hope somebody someday will paint a picture with women at the Last Supper, because in order for some of the things to happen that happened there, you would need both men and women. And again, art informs our discussions, doesn't it? And as they did eat, he said, "Verily, the name of Amen, I say unto you that one of you shall betray me." And they were very distressed and sorrowful. Every one of them said unto him, "Lord, is it I?" He answered, "He that dippeth his hand with me in the dish, the same will give me up." And the Son of Man goeth as it is written of him, but woe unto him, a lament again, a sad lament, unto that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It had been good for that man if he had not been born. Then Judas, which betrayed him, answered and said, Master, is it I? And he said unto him, Thou hast said. I know there's a lot of dispute as to whether Judas was told to betray the Lord. According to this particular book in Matthew, it seems very clear that Judas went out on his own, that something had happened to where he wanted to do this. I don't get the sense that the Lord told him to. In my heart of hearts, I think I read a book. It was a fictional book, but Christ was saying Judas is the only one with enough heart to actually betray me. And he asked him to do that as the last thing he asked him to do for him. And Judas was able to do it, but then he wasn't able to live with it. So there's a lot of other commentary that Judas has already sworn himself to the devil, and he's all part of this very diabolical darkness that's already been set in motion. So I don't have any answers there as far as Judas or what his intent and fate was. We know here that it was not good, and that he regretted doing it. And I think that's so true of evil. It's going to entice you and make you feel powerful and rich, but in the end, it will just leave you for dead, and you're left with the consequences of your choices. Verse 26, and as they were eating, Jesus took bread and blessed and brake it, tore it up, and blessed and brake it, and gave it to his disciples, and said, Take, eat, this is my body. And he took the cup and gave thanks and gave it to them, saying, Drink ye all of it. Now that's an interesting part. We haven't heard that before, have we? All of it, to take the entire cup. I think that's really instructive in regard to, as Neil Maxwell said, our own little bitter cups that we all must drink. I have here a Passover set. My dear friend Roberta North brought me from Israel, and I love this so much. So here's the cup and the plate that they set out for Elijah in Passover. And again, we should have a podcast about Passover, but I love this one because this one is represented by Miriam and the ladies rejoicing after they've crossed the Great Deep or the Red Sea. But again, here you've got this symbol, right, of the cup, the bread, the matzah, and freedom from earthly bondage in the festival of the Passover. And yet at the same time, the Lamb of God is going to be slain, and he's going to have you use these same tokens later on to remember his great sacrifice. For this is my blood of the new covenant, which is shed or poured out for many for the pardon of sins. And when they had sung a hymn, they went out into the Mount of Olives. Then Jesus said unto them, All of you will be tripped up or trapped or led astray because of me tonight. So it is written, I will smite to death the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered abroad. Remember that sheep are probata, they're those going forward. But when I am risen again, I will go before you into Galilee. Peter answered and said unto him, Though all men should be offended or led astray or tripped up because of you, yet will I never in any time fall away. And Jesus said unto him, Verily, sorry, Peter. This night before the cock crow, you shall disown me 3 times. Now, this kind of has the same debate around it that the Judas question does, which is Peter commanded to do that? Or does he do it of his own cowardice? And I was listening to the podcast Unshaken, and he had a great point about the difference between Peter, who's the rock, and Simon, who is the mortal. And I loved looking at that, how Simon is still growing into his Peterness. And I think all of us do that too. As we learn to shed the world, it takes us some practice to give up our lower self to become our higher selves. I've thought a lot about this. My own opinion is that Peter has not yet learned to fear God more than man. I love Peter. I am so grateful that we have Peter in the scriptures. He gives me hope because he's all laid out there. We know all of his strengths and weaknesses. We know all the things he says that are wonderful and kind of stupid. And I love that we get a whole person here, that he's not infallible, that he's not perfect. And maybe the Lord did tell him to, but the lament here and the bitterness, I think, is going to become the springboard for his ministry, that he will resolve after betraying the Lord that is something he will never do. Words are cheap, and I think it's really easy to say the words, but backing them up is tougher. Verse 35, Peter said to him, though I should die with thee, yet I will not deny thee. Likewise also said all the disciples. Well, again, you're going to see that not many of them stick around even. Then cometh Jesus with them unto a place called Gethsemane, and saith unto the disciples, sit ye here while I go and pray. And he took with him Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, James and John, and began to be very intensely sorrowful and very heavy. This word for heavy in Hebrew is weight, to feel the weight. But in Greek, it means to feel fear, to lack courage, to be distressed, to be troubled. Then he said unto them, my soul is intensely grieved all around, even unto death. Abide ye here and watch with me. There's that watch again at this critical time. Just stay alert and watchful with me. And he advanced further. Okay. Now, I think I always thought this was like to go into, just went a little further, but I think it means he went deeper into the experience. He went deeper into the pain. He advanced further in to making this great reconciliation for the sins of men, which, wow, because that first part made him grieved even to death. So he proceeded further and fell on his face and prayed, saying, oh, my Father, if it be possible. And this word possible comes from that word dunamis, which is dynamic, explosive heavenly power that enables the miraculous to happen. If it is in your power, let this portion pass from me. I know it says cup, but I would translate it portion. It's that particular piece. It's that particular part. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will, or as you wish, or as you are willing to do. It's so staggering that he actually asks if there's a way around this. Is there a way to, through heaven's magic and power and miracle, for him to do this without having to drink that particular portion? And if the Lord feels like that, certainly our lives will have moments like that. 100%. And he cometh unto the disciples and discovers them asleep. It does mean sleep, but I think it more means exhausted. I know the Lord is enacting this. He's taking on all the powers of darkness. He's taking on the Prince of Darkness himself. I don't imagine that the disciples are immune to that. I don't imagine that this fury and this darkness and this sorrow is just isolated around the person of the Lord. I think they all are having to experience it in some degree, and it means they're exhausted. They've been overcome by it. And I think that's true of all of us too. Sometimes those portions are more than we can handle. They are more than we feel we can drink. And interestingly, he saith unto Peter, right? So maybe be careful what you protest, right? Methinks the lady doth protest too much. Maybe Peter protested too much, because the Lord gently and lovingly says, Peter, thus you did not have the strength to watch with me 1 hour? Here you just told me you would never deny me. You would always stand by me. And the first hour, your strength failed you. I don't know what heavenly time transpired. I'm hoping it was an hour. Like, my heart hopes it's not this long, huge process for him. An hour of that would be too much for any of us. And I don't know how that transpired in heavenly time either. And again, this section, the second injunction, watch and pray. Do you see how many times, if I could pick one theme from these chapters, it is watch and pray. Be on the watch, be paying attention, that ye enter not into calamity, affliction, trial. The spirit indeed is willing, eager, willing, right? Peter, your spirit is willing, but your flesh is weak. You're still human and you're growing. He went again, this is the third time. The second time, and prayed, saying, O my Father, if this may not pass away from me except I drink it, or take it in, or imbibe it, thy will be done. And he came and found them asleep again, overcome again. Their eyes were heavy. This can also mean that their mind's eye, their vision, was weighted down. It was burdened. It was overcome. Pareo. Just absolutely overcome. Too much weight. And can you blame them? And he left them and went away again and prayed the third time, saying the same words, sorry. It's interesting to me. I think all of us have had times where we want to make a bargain with heaven, and we keep asking if there's no other way. Our very, very first mother also asked if there was no other way. Isn't that interesting? Her name actually is a finite form of the Lord's infinite name in Hebrew. She's definitely a type and a shadow of the Lord. And I think that those times also serve to fortify him to drink that portion, that piece that was going to be catastrophically hard. And that's all we have of the account in here. Then cometh he to his disciples and saith unto them, sleep on now and take your rest. Rest, something that's needed after a particularly toilsome road or task. Behold, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. And then it says, wake up, let us be going. Behold, he is approaching who will surrender me. And while he yet spake, lo, Judas, one of the 12, came, and with a great, like a huge multitude, I'm not sure I got this, but it's a lot of people, came with swords and staves from the chief priests and elders of the people. Here they come, and they come with the world's answers, right? Sword, clubs, might, right. Well, the Lord, there's nothing to him. But I think it's important for us to look at how we come at our problems too. And are we coming with the world's answers? Or are we coming with the Lord's solutions? And perhaps the Lord's solutions are don't do anything, which is exactly what he's going to tell his disciples to do. Hold your peace. I don't want you to do anything. Nobody wins in a fight. Nobody wins in a war. Now he that betrayed him gave them a sign, saying, whomsoever I shall kiss, the same as he. Seize him quickly. And that word kiss comes from the word phileo, someone you regard and cherish, right? This brotherly love. And forthwith he came to Jesus and said, Hail, Master, and kissed him. And Jesus said unto him, Friend. Now, this is that word friend that I pointed out earlier, which means viewed as a companion, but is an imposter. The Lord perfectly sees through it. Wherefore art thou come? Then they came and laid hands on Jesus and took him. And behold, one of them, which were with Jesus, stretched out his hand and drew his sword and struck a servant of the high priest and smote off his ear. Then Jesus said unto him, Put up again thy sword into its place, for all they that take the sword shall perish by the sword. Thinkest thou that I cannot now pray to my Father, and he shall presently give me more than 12 legions of angels? But how then shall the scriptures be fulfilled that it must be? Well, a legion, if you don't know, is at this time around 5,000 soldiers. So he's saying, I could have 60,000 angels right here, right now. All right. It could possibly be even more. A legion could go anywhere from 3,000 to 6,000 soldiers. And clearly, again, the Lord is one who is in charge of all of this and understands what needs to happen. Verse 55, in that same hour said Jesus to the multitudes, Are you come out against me, a bandit with swords and staves, to take me? I sat daily with you, teaching in the temple, and ye laid no hold on me. Again, this idea of, if I'm really a malefactor, why didn't you just arrest me? Why didn't you just do this out in the open? This would be a thief, right? Someone in the night. That hypocrisy. But all this was done that the scriptures of the prophets might be fulfilled. And then this last line, then all the disciples forsook him and escaped. Now, this word forsook actually can be translated as sent away, discharged, let go, released. Perhaps the Lord said, you've got me, let these ones go. And they escaped and ran away. Well, Then he's taken to the high priest. He won't even dignify them with an answer, which I think tells you everything about how he feels about them. And the thing they condemn him of is blasphemy. Clearly, the one thing he is not guilty of, which is just this ridiculous irony. He suffers all of it. And then Peter, of course, is confronted 3 times. I'm going to try and speed up because this is a really long podcast, and denies it. And each time he denies it more vehemently and more dramatically, like swearing and taking an oath. And verse 75, well, let's do 74. He began to curse and swear, saying, I know not the man. Interesting. This sounds just like the language used in the parable of the 10 virgins, doesn't it? Where he says, you don't know me, or I don't know you. Here's Peter playing the part of the foolish virgin. I know not the man, and immediately the cock crew. And Peter remembered the word of Jesus, which said unto him, before the cock crow, thou shalt deny me thrice. And he went out and wept. And it's like sobbed, wailed violently. Peter's on a journey too, like all of us. And I'm grateful that this information's here, that we can see that prophets aren't perfect. They don't do everything right. They're not infallible. Peter will become a rock as a result of that. Well, they took him and they sent him to Pontius Pilate. And let's go to verse 3 of chapter 27. Judas, which had betrayed him, when he saw that he was condemned, regretted or repented, changed his mind, and brought again the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders, saying, I have made a mistake. I have betrayed guiltless blood. And they said, what is that to us? See thou. And he flung, chucked the pieces of silver in the temple and departed and went and hanged himself. Again, this idea that evil will use you indiscriminately. And when your role is played, they will leave you for dead. They don't care. They don't care. And the chief priests, this is just the lowest. This is why they're whited sepulchres, my friends. They picked up the silver pieces and said it's not lawful to put them in the treasury because it is the price of blood. Although I'm pretty sure this came from the temple tax in the first place. And so they used it to buy a potter's field where they bury strangers. I don't know if they bought it to bury Jesus, but to this day, it's still known as that. Well, Jesus stood before Pilate, and verse 11, the governor interrogated him, saying, art thou the king of the Jews? And Jesus said unto him, thou sayest. And when he was accused of the chief priests and elders, he answered nothing. The fact that he's willing to talk to Pilate and not the chief priest tells you something about where he holds Pilate, who would be, again, just a swine. He's unclean. He's a Roman. He's a dirty bugger. And the fact that Christ is willing to converse with Pilate as opposed to the chief priest should tell you something. Then Pilate said unto him, hearest thou not how many things they witness against thee? And he answered him to never a word, insomuch that the governor admired him greatly. There was something so magnificent and stately about him. Now at that feast, the governor was wont to release unto the people a prisoner whom they would. And they had then a notable prisoner called Barabbas, which means Bar Abba, the son of Abba. If you want to go back, I was hoping we would have time, but I'm not going to. In the book of Exodus, you have a scapegoat. You have one that is laden with sin that's released out into the wilderness. And then the innocent lamb is the one that is slaughtered. And so that's a perfect type for what's going to happen here. Therefore, when they were gathered together, Pilate said unto them, Whom will ye that I release unto you? He's already thinking of how he can get Christ out of this because he has such an esteem for him. Barabbas or Jesus, which is called Christ. For he knew that for grudge or for spite they had delivered him. He perfectly knew that this was a personal vendetta. This was something that wasn't lawful. The Romans are not. Here's the interesting thing. He was condemned by the Sanhedrin for blasphemy. Well, the Romans don't care about blasphemy. They're not going to crucify someone for blasphemy. That's not something that's in their wheelhouse. So there's a great debate about who actually killed the Savior. Was it the Romans or was it the high priests? And also, I think is great precaution for all of us about feeding hate, feeding grudges. They just take on a whole life of their own, don't they? Wow, they can take on so much dirtiness so quickly. Verse 19, when he was set down on the judgment seat, his wife sent unto him, saying, Have not one thing to do with this holy man, for I have felt many strong emotions and feelings this day in a dream because of him. But the chief priests and elders persuaded the multitude that they should ask Barabbas and destroy Jesus. The governor answered and said unto them, Which of the two should I release? And they said, Barabbas. Now, Barabbas he's in there, I believe, for sedition and murder. Right? I mean, just look at this. Pilate saith unto them, What shall I do then with Jesus, which is called Christ? They all said unto him, Let him be crucified. And the governor said, What injury has he done? But they cried out the more abundantly, saying, Let him be crucified. When Pilate saw that he could prevail nothing, that there was nothing he could do to appease them, but rather that a riot was made. Now, this is interesting. He took water and washed his hands before the multitude. Now, I know so many of us like to heap the blame on Pilate, and he doesn't have much of a spine, but here he's saying, this is a just and holy man, and I am washing my hands of this. This isn't upon me. Saying, I am guiltless of the blood of this. See, like yours says, see ye to it. The to it's not in my Greek text. See, like you're a witness that I'm washing my hands of this. Then answered all the people and said, His blood be upon us and on our children. Well, you can see that, unfortunately, that request has been granted. Then released he Barabbas unto them, and when he had flogged Jesus, another attempt to try and pacify them, saying, Look, I've whipped him. He's penitent, maybe hoping, or I think he also could have been, and this is just totally Mandy Midrash, he also could have been trying to weaken him so that he would die quickly. Such was his admiration for this person. He probably thought, you know what? I don't want him to hang up there for days. I have no idea. I don't, and like I said, we're just looking at Matthew. I don't know. Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the praetorium and gathered unto him the whole band of soldiers for entertainment. A cohort is 50 soldiers, and they stripped him. Here's where you're going to see those echoes of the chapter we just looked at. And put on him a scarlet robe. And when they had plaited a crown of thorns, they put it on his head and a staff in his right hand. Now, what acanthus is the word used there? What has thorns? Roses, right? I think there's some little, there might be something there. And they bowed the knee before him and mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews." And they spit upon him and took the reed and smote him on the head. And after they had ridiculed him, they took the robe off of him and put his own raiment on him and led him away to be crucified. Now, Denver Snuffer has a great commentary on how all of the things that were done here are the actual exact reverse of the temple ordinances that are designed to bless. You have kingship, you've got raiment, you've got a crown, you've got staff, you've got an anointing, you've got, these motions that are made to bless and make someone a king. And these are all the exact mockeries of the temple, and how there's definitely a diabolical source inspiring all of this. And as they came out, they found a man of Cyrene, Simon by name. Him they compelled to bear his cross. And when they were come up unto a place called Golgotha, that is to say, a place of the skull, they gave him vinegar to drink mingled with gall, bitter herbs, right? That literally translates as bitter herbs, which is right here on your Passover plate. And when he had tasted thereof, he would not drink. And they crucified him and divided his garments, casting lots, that it might be spoken by the prophet. They parted my garments among them, and upon my vesture did they cast lots. And sitting down, they watched him there. And they set up over his head the accusation written, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." That's the accusation, my friends. Then there were two thieves crucified with him, one on the right and another on the left. And they that passed by vilified them, shaking their heads. So you have this congregation, and then you also have all of them going. Now, when someone's crucified, they're taken outside of the city walls, because this is not something that would happen inside the city walls. It's very uncivilized. And I know in our paintings, we see these great, big, huge, giant crosses. Well, the fact of the matter is it would be just off the road. Well, I'm not saying it would be. This is my best at what I can get based on what we know. It's just off the road, and that there was a crossbar laid across Christ's shoulders, and that they lifted up the crossbar and nailed the crossbar to a tree or a piece of wood. And so he didn't carry the whole cross. He would carry that the linear crossbar that would go across his shoulders, and that would be put on a tree or another piece of wood, or hung on, perhaps a metal stave or something like that. And so that's why the particular excavations for the Garden Tomb actually look more archaeologically correct to be in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, because that would have been outside the city walls at the time of Christ. The current walls in Jerusalem are of a much later date, if that makes any sense. So you have him just right there on the road, and everyone walking by is just making fun of him and shaking their heads at him. And I would imagine that our good old buddies, the chief priests and scribes, are all inciting everyone to go by and make it worse, right? It says, they said, You who demolished the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. If you're the Son of God, come down from the cross. Likewise, also the chief priests mocking him with the scribes and elders said, he saved others, himself he cannot save. Well, clearly he can. He chooses not to. If he be the King of Israel, let him come down now from the cross and we will believe him. Do you really think they would actually believe him? I mean, part of me wishes it would be amazing if he did come down off the cross. And then what would they say? Well, they'd really just go after him, wouldn't they? He knew the plan and he knew what he needed to do to fulfill the plan. The best talk I've ever heard about the character of Christ is by Neil Maxwell. It's called Jesus of Nazareth, Savior and King. I really, really recommend it for your Easter reading. It's the most succinct, beautiful depiction of the Savior's character. I love what he says about this point. And the thieves which were with him also upbraided him. Now from the 6th hour there was darkness over all the land until the 9th hour. And about the 9th hour Jesus cried with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, which is to say, my God, why have you deserted me? I think those are words we all say also at points in our life. We do encounter divine silence. And what do you do when you encounter divine silence? Do you persist? Do you give up? Sometimes heaven does remain silent. I think that's what that shows us right here. Some of them that stood there, when they heard that, said, this man calls for Elijah. And straightway, I love this person, whoever it is. I didn't even know about him till I was studying this in depth this week. Straightway, one of them ran and took a sponge and filled it with vinegar, put it on a reed, and gave him to drink. We just talked about this. When saw ye me thirsty and gave me drink? Whoever this person was, and I don't know if he was part of the recruited crowd or not, but he clearly, his heart was, his or her, probably him, I don't know, was swollen in him, and he ran and got him a drink. That's character, my friends. That's one of the heroes of this story. And the rest said, let him be. Let us see whether Elias will come to save him. They're just going to sit there and watch him suffer, even after he outlined it perfectly, explicitly earlier in the week. Jesus, when he had cried again with a loud voice, yielded up the spirit. And behold, the veil of the temple was split in two from the top down to the bottom. Honestly, I think that's the best job of any angel. I don't know if that's him or I don't know, but just like grabbing that huge veil. It's ginormous. It's heavy. It's several layers thick and I love that the text says top to bottom, like it from heaven down. The Holy of Holies is made laid bare. Access to heaven is open. The earth quaked, the rocks were rent, and the graves were opened, and many of the bodies of the saints which slept arose. Verse 52, I never noticed either, and came out of the graves after his resurrection, and went into the holy city and appeared unto many. So this whole idea of how they're trying to cover up the resurrection, the fact is that right here in verse 53, we have all this evidence that after Christ was resurrected, many others were also resurrected and appeared in the holy city by the mouths of 2 or 3 witnesses, my friends. Now there was a centurion, that's someone who's over 100, right? Sent. And they that were with him watching Jesus saw the earthquake and those things that were done. They feared or were alarmed greatly, saying, truly, this was the Son of God. Now, there's an interesting tale that the name of one of these centurion, or this particular one, was named Maximus. And after this time, he becomes a guardian of Mary Magdalene and follows her to Egypt and to Gaul and remains her bodyguard. I don't know how to substantiate that, but that's where that tale comes from. So if you ever hear me talk about Saint Maxime or Saint Maximus, that's where that tale comes from. And there were lots of women beholding afar off. Now the women are there taking in all of this, who followed Jesus from Galilee, ministering unto him, among which was Mary Magdalene. She's always listed first. That's significant. And Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of Zebedee's children. When the evening was come, there came a rich man of Arimathea named Joseph, who also himself was Jesus' disciple. He went to Pilate and begged the body of Jesus. Then Pilate commanded the body to be delivered. And when Joseph had taken the body, he enveloped it in clean linen cloth, and laid it in his own new tomb, which he had hewn out of the rock. Now, this tells you something about Joseph of Arimathea. He was prepared. He knew what was coming. He had the linen, but he had a brand new tomb that had just been hewn. He knows who's going in it. And he rolled a great stone to the door of the sepulchre and departed. And there was Mary Magdalene and the other Mary sitting over against the sepulchre. Well, who's the other Mary? That's a great question. I can think of one very prominent one. That would be my guess. Now, the next day that followed, the day of the preparation, the chief priests and Pharisees came together unto Pilate. He's got to be so tired of them, saying, we remember that the impostor said while he was yet alive, after 3 days I will rise again. Command therefore that the sepulchre be made sure until the 3rd day, lest his disciples come by night and steal him away and say unto the people, he is risen from the dead. So the last fraud will be worse than the first. Pilate said unto them, ye have a watch. Okay, this is our clue that they have their own watch. They have their own guards. They have their own armies. Make it as sure as you can, like use your own people. So they went and made the sepulchre sure, sealing the stone and setting a watch. So that's another amazing proof that their own watch that they set up so they didn't get foiled is going to get foiled. And finally, we are getting there, chapter 28. When I was a teenager, our ward had a ward choir that was directed by Brother Jessup, who had us sing the most beautiful songs. And I will never forget, we learned the first 5 verses of this to some beautiful music, and I can never read it without thinking of that. So in the end of the Sabbath, as it began to dawn, well, it's still dark, really, is what John says, toward the first day of the week, which would be Sunday, came Mary Magdalene and the other Mary to see the sepulchre. She's listed first again, and the other Mary is listed second. And behold, there was a great earthquake, for the angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone from the door and sat upon it. His luster was like lightning, and his raiment white as snow. And for fear of him, the keepers did shake. They totally failed and became as dead men. And the angel answered and said to the women, fear not ye, for I know you seek Jesus, who was crucified. Don't be alarmed. I know who you seek. He is not here, for he is risen as he said. Come, see the place where the Lord lay. and go quickly and tell his disciples that he is risen from the dead. And behold, he goeth before you into Galilee, and there shall ye see him. Lo, I have told you. And they departed quickly, speedily. They booked it. They ran from the sepulchre with reverence, wonder, and great joy, and did run to bring his disciples word, to share the news. We have this gorgeous parallel of the woman at the well when she discovers who the Lord is, that she goes and tells all. And I think it also is Eve who shares the great news of her choice to fall, and that because of this, they would come to know through their own experience the good from the bad. Well, my friends, that's a lot. I don't know if it was a lot for you. I'm dying over here. It's interesting to look at this text through the eyes of Matthew. It's interesting to look at those few different pieces that we pick up that aren't part of maybe some of the other Gospels. But I wish you well on this Good Friday. I wish you peace, the peace that only the Lord gives. I wish you stamina and fortitude that you can drink your bitter cups, that you can take that portion that you do not want to take, but that you can trust in the Lord and know that he is a hard master, but that he wants you prepared. He wants you to know his voice, and he wants you to stand watch as a sentry awaiting his instructions. That's the most important thing you can do and you can learn at this point. Wishing you so much Easter joy, heavenly rest, and love and light.